Okay. Yeah, I'm recording this class. Usually I record the first class and put it up there, but the internet completely crashed on me and I couldn't load my presentation, so I had to do everything on the whiteboard. I have no idea if I covered everything I was supposed to. I think I got to everything. We'll find out. But we're starting to talk about some rhythm. Okay? We've been talking a lot about how we read pitch, how we read melody on the staff. Now we're talking about rhythm. And if we have all electronics away, guys, because there's a very specific way that I want you to approach this that might be a little bit different than how you approached it, even if you're comfortable with music before. So it might look and sound a little bit different. It's all getting at the same thing, but I have a slightly different approach, I think, than some people when it comes to teaching rhythm, because I think over all of my years of teaching, when it comes to rhythm basics, I found the biggest divide in people sort of wrapping their head around that concept. It's like algebra. Once you get it, once the light bulb goes off and those rules make sense, everything else after that makes sense. But until some of those basic pieces click into place, it can be really frustrating. And rhythm is like that for some people. Rhythm can be very, very frustrating. All right? So I don't want you to feel discouraged if I'm up here talking and you're like, I have no idea what you just said. That makes no sense to me. We're going to slow it down. We're going to try to break it down into little tiny pieces. We can work on it in lessons because I have different ways that I can teach it if you come in and you ask me some questions and need help. So this is kind of just a general way to do it, but I have some different tools and tricks that might help you if this doesn't make sense to you. Okay? So where we need to start. Okay? I'm not going to show this, but if you need a quick reference video on some of these basic things that I'm talking about that shows them, again, a little bit differently than how I'm going to explain them, but it's all the same stuff. So if you guys get to doing this weekly work and you need a little extra help, find this link. Remember, I put all this stuff in Google Classroom, so you can go to this presentation, find that link, and there's a little video that can help show all of the things I'm about to talk to you about, okay? So we're talking about note values, right? Rhythm is how we take musical time from the beginning of the song to the end of the song, the amount of time that takes up. You shouldn't have your phone out right now, even if this is not the class you're usually in. Okay. So from beginning to end, right, that musical time. How we divide that up into long or short durations. Okay? I need to know how long I'm going to hold on to this note for. Is it just 1 beat or is it 8 beats? Right? That's what we're talking about with rhythm. How we divide up musical time. And we use these symbols to help us know. Right? We've got a whole note that looks like a hole in the ground. Then I add a stem to that to make it a half note. Half note is worth half of whatever the whole is worth. Okay? If I want to make it even smaller, I'm going to color in the note head here. That becomes a quarter note. A quarter note is 1/4 of whatever the whole note is worth. Right? I can fit 2 quarter notes in 1 half note. If I want to divide it even smaller, again, into 2, each one of these quarter notes I can divide into 2. I add a flag, and now I have an 1/8 note. An 1/8 note is worth 1/8 of whatever a whole note is worth. Okay? So that's if I continue to divide it in 2 in equal pieces. I can keep going for a long time. I can get 32nd notes. I can get 64th notes. I can keep going. Okay? So those notes tell me how long I'm supposed to hold on to something in conjunction with the time signature. Okay? And that's where we're headed here. These aren't very useful unless we know what time signature we're in, because it means very different things. Girls, is that going to work? Tori, put your phone away. Thank you very much. Okay. So the time signature really tells us the information we need to know to make this work. It's like these are the letters, and until we start putting them into a sentence, it doesn't make any sense, right? We have to have all of that structure in place. So time signatures are those 2 numbers that you see at the beginning of music. There's one on the top, one on the bottom. Most of the time, that's what you'll see. You might see a C for common time. You might see a C with a cut through it for cut time. Right? So there might be some other things there, but usually you see 1 number on top, 1 number on bottom. All right. So there's a couple of different things that time signatures tell us in terms of information. And this is where some people get them crossed. We're talking about 2 completely separate things. All right. So the first thing a time signature is going to tell us is how many counts a whole note is worth. That's what I need to know to figure out this. Right? So if my bottom number is 4, my whole note is worth 4. And then I can figure out that this is worth 2, this is worth 1, that's worth a half. if my bottom number is 2, I plug 2 in up here. So my whole note's worth 2, my half note's worth 1, so on and so forth. If it's 8, I put 8 up here, and then I can divide it out from there. Okay, so the bottom number can tell us how many notes a whole note, or how many counts a whole note is worth. That's not the only thing it can tell us, and that's where people get a little bit confused. So this is one piece. Then we move on and we do a completely separate thing, okay? So we just talked about that. All right. So you've probably heard this before at some point in your musical education. Sometime between kindergarten and now, I am going to guess you've heard a music teacher say something along these lines. Top number is how many beats in a measure. Bottom number is what note gets the beat. Who's heard that version of it? Okay. That works for simple meters. That works for simple meters, which a lot of the things we read are a simple meter, right? 4/4, 3/4, 2/2, all simple meters. You divide the main beat into 2 pieces, right? And then 2 again and 2 again. Things are mostly divided into 2. Okay, so for these ones, for 4/4, 2/4, 2/2, this rule definitely works, right? 4 beats in a measure, the quarter note gets the beat. That works. It doesn't work with compound meters, because you do have, okay, I'm just going to say this. We're going to talk more about compound meters later, so you don't need to really know a lot about this yet. Here's an example of a compound meter. If I use that rule, how many beats in a measure, what note gets 1 beat? 6 beats in a measure, 8th note gets the beat. You can count it that way. You could say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But the beat usually in 6/8 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 2 beats per measure, right? So that's where things get a little muddy if you use this. It's still possible. It will still get you to the right answer eventually. It just doesn't really speak to how many beats are in the measure accurately. So here's another way of saying it that always works. Okay? The top number is how many of what kind of note can fit in a measure. That works for everyone. Katie, if the other one makes more sense to you, stick with that for now. That's okay. All right? That's what I said. This is like, there's so much stuff. Okay? So here's all that means. If I talk about 2/2, how many? 2. My answer is 2. How many of what kind of note? If I make that into a fraction that's a half note, I can fit 2 half notes in a measure, or the equivalent of 2 half notes in a measure. Because if every rhythm we ever had was just 2 half notes per measure, da, 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 that would be a pretty boring song, right? If that was all we ever did. So I can change those out for things that equal 2 half notes per measure, right? 2 half notes could be a whole note. I could put that in a measure of 2/2. 2 half notes could be 4 quarter notes. I could put that in a measure of 2/2. Yes.
How do you figure out what note the bottom note, like the bottom number is? Like, how do you figure out that 8 is an 8?
How do you figure out 8 is an 8?
Or like 4 is a quarter note.
Oh, yeah, I got you. Okay. So when I say what kind of note, make that bottom number into a fraction. 1/8, 8th note. 1/2, half note. 1/4, a quarter note. Yeah, that's a good point. Yep. So that's how I figure out the kind, if that's the way I'm doing it. Okay? How many of those can I fit in a measure? That's basically what we're trying to figure out, right? We'll worry about counts here in just a second. And we're doing simple meters. We're not doing compound stuff yet. I just wanted to show you the difference, right? So that's just another way of saying it that always works. Blah, blah, blah. We're getting to that. Okay, here we go. I want to do this 4/4 one. And I'm just going to draw it all in one line. I don't really care right now what that looks like. So in 4/4, using the rules we just talked about, I can fit 4 quarter notes in a measure. Here's an example of a measure in 4/4. Okay? I fit 4 quarter notes in that measure. What else could I fit in a measure of 4/4? What's another thing I could do? Cool. A whole note. I could just do this. Sure could. What else could I do? Next. 2 half notes. Sure could. What else could I do? 8 eighth notes. Good. What else could I do?
16.
16 notes. What else could I do?
Dotted quarter note, or dotted half note.
Dotted half note and sure. Okay. So anything that's the equivalent of 4 quarter notes. Whole note, 2 half notes, a half note and 2 quarter notes, rests. Don't forget that each one of these, for the symbol for sound, right, this tells me how long to hold on to sound, this tells me how long to hold on to silence. Same amount of time, sound, silence, right? We talk about rest. So there's a whole rest, 4 beats of silence, half rest, 2 beats of silence, quarter rest, 1 beat of silence, eighth rest, a half a beat of silence. So each one of those things has an equivalent rest, okay? So I'm going to put this up here as my example. So one of the things that you're going to be asked to do in your work today is figure out this. Find the bottom note of the time signature, plug it into a chart like this, and then tell me what each one of those is worth, okay? So that's one of the things. The other thing it's going to ask you to do is tell me how many counts something is worth, and then talk about counting language. So let's start with how many counts it's worth. All right, so a quarter note is worth how many in 4/4 time? We just talked about that. 1, good, right? We found that out here in this chart. So each one of these is 1, okay? So that means this one is also worth 1. How about a quarter rest? Also 1, just of silence, okay? How about a half rest? 2. In fact, I'm going to do a half note, I think, instead of half rest there. I'll do it this way. It doesn't matter too much, but just for a labeling example. Okay, now when I say label the counting language, when we were doing 1, 2, look and say, so we were doing rhythm repeat. Let's pretend this is a measure that we're going to do as a 1, 2, look and say and rhythm repeat. Okay, so I'm going to go 1, 2, look and say. 1, 2, 3. Go do that one more time. 1, 2, look and say. 1, 3, 4. So it should be 1, 3. Notice my hands keep clapping 4 times. 1, 3. The pulse doesn't stop. Those beats still happen. 1, 2, 3, 4 beats still happen. So when I talk about counting language, you're going to label that. Here's what that looks like. This note happens on beat 1, the first beat of the measure. This happens on beat 2, but I don't say that out loud. I don't say 2 out loud, so I'm going to put 2 in parentheses. It still exists. It didn't disappear. It's still there. I just don't say it out loud. Okay? This happens on the beginning of beat 3 and takes up beat 4. I just don't say it out loud because those things take up space, right? We talk about how many beats something takes up. They take up space. Here's how you can check your work to make sure your counting language is right. Okay, this is kind of the last thing, and then I'm going to give you a little work time here. So this is a harder step, but if you've been doing okay with rhythm repeat in class, this should be okay. If not, please come in for lesson help. This is where I start to get lots of people coming in for lessons, okay? So this, we said, is worth 1 beat. It's taking up 1 beat of the measure. This is taking up the next beat, right? It's 1 whole beat. There's 1 whole beat, beat 2. This one's going to take up 2 beats. It's taking up both beat 3 and beat 4. So you're always going to, in a measure of 4/4 time, have 4 numbers in your counting language. Always. I'm going to say that again, because I can't tell you how many times I get examples like this back, and it'll say 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In a measure of 4/4, there are 4 pulses. Therefore, there's going to be 4 numbers in your counting language example. Always. Even if you don't say it, right? These are in parentheses. I didn't say them, but they didn't disappear. They're there. So we want to show those. If it was a measure of 3/4, how many numbers would be in your counting language? 3, because there's 3 beats, right? If it's 7/4, which can happen, how many numbers would you have in your counting language? 7, because there's 7 pulses. There's 7 beats. Okay, so that's another way you can check your work there. And this is one where if you need help, ask. I'll give you a little bit of work time. So those are kind of the 3 things you have to do in your work for this week. Here's the basic, the intro level. Here's the advanced. They're very similar. It's just this one you're going to do a little rhythm composing, writing some rhythms in a measure and putting them in. We're only, right now, focusing on whole notes, half notes, quarter notes. We haven't done any subdividing lower than the quarter note yet. So no eighth note stuff. We don't have to worry about ands. We're not there yet. Okay, so just these 3. Pick which one you'd like to do. You should have a minute or 2 here to do some work. If you have questions, let me know. This will be due next Tuesday. You should have your ledger lines and accidental sheets today if you're on time. What's up, Madison?
So for 3 to 2, price and everything?
Yes. Yes.